I'm Chris Salter. I'm the founder and CEO of Music Wizard, and I've been asked to share kind of a little bit of my background. I didn't, I'm not a child prodigy in music, and far from it. In fact, I didn't start studying music formally until I was in college. I stumbled upon a genius level piano teacher who later became a very good friend and actually helped us create the Piano Wizard Academy curriculum for our program. But I took a very different view, kind of inspired by this teacher who had a kind of no sacred cows, all-inclusive look at that music was a birthright for all of us. And I was, at the time, a linguistics major in college, and I just took this group piano class and got a great teacher, to say the least, and I ended up playing Bach in a couple of years in this group piano class and took many other classes in music because I could, kind of as electives. Took so many, in fact, that I ended up with a double degree in music and linguistics, and the parallel study of those two fields fascinated me, especially historical linguistics, how language evolves over time, and geography, and I saw a very close correlation between how music notation evolved and was, modified so dramatically over time and distance. And then I also saw developmental linguistics, where how does a child learn their native language. And this probably was the most profound insight for me, is that there seemed to be certain cultures that learned music as if it was a native language. And that the way I was studying in college, except for that one teacher, was very formal, like you learn a second language, you memorize vocabulary, you study the grammar, you try these formulas. It's a very abstract process, whereas when you learn your native language, it's pure experimentation. You learn by doing. So I saw certain cultures as having a very different kind of approach, and actually once I graduated with that double degree, I continued that exploration. I went to UCLA, got into the ethnomusicology program, and my thesis was that Brazilians, as one example, learn music as if it's a native language, and I got the Organization of American States to send me down there on a fellowship, which I extended for another year, and had the most fascinating time of my life, seeing Brazil is an incredibly musical culture, and how did they do that? And what I learned most surprisingly was that a lot of the transmission was very direct modeling, but very visual. And that visual cue kind of surprised me, because I'd been studying like sheet music and very theory-based, except for this one class I'd had. And that was the basis of this insight, is that if we can take something, the way you learn your native language, you speak first, then you learn to read words you already know, and then you study the grammar after you're already fluent in both the speaking and the reading. Then you get to the grammar. Whereas with maybe traditional piano lessons, not many people teach that way anymore, but the approach was, here's every good boy does fine, this is sharp and flat, and here's a key signature, there's a time signature, go, right? And you just were kind of overwhelmed with all this abstract information, and the last thing you did in that sequence, you started with the grammar, the theory of music, you got to a reading, and then you got to play. So we inverted that, so the kids can play through the game. Then they recognize how music notation represents something they already know how to play. They're fluent in the song. They see that's how it's represented in music notation, and then we introduce theory. And it is working far, far better than I ever hoped. Now, personally, this insight stayed in my head for another 10 years after I graduated, until I felt like I would get a brain tumor if I couldn't get this game that I had invented in my head out. And that became the Piano Wizard and the Piano Wizard Academy. But in a way, we've cracked the musical code, and there's a lot more behind this than just this one game. Piano is just the flagship product, and the iPhone and iPad make that extremely accessible to virtually anyone. Where my real desire is to take the rest of that color coding and kind of reveal the underlying DNA, if you will, the elements of music, and let kids play with that on a very elemental level. Give them a kind of musical alphabet, not what we traditionally think of, but a different one that is still obeying the the laws of music in a way that's very natural to them, and they can play with these game objects like Legos or Tinker Toys and begin to construct and deconstruct music very naturally. That's my deeper vision beyond Piano Wizard. We have Guitar Wizard, Compose Wizard, Drum Wizard, but I have another probably dozen products to roll out in stretch goals over time. So our biggest vision is really to make, through the iPhone and iPad, music completely accessible to even very young children. With the iPad, 2, 3-year-olds are playing with this and getting it. The tactile, in this, the touchscreen is really taps into two things that are very, very powerful: the hands and the eyes, right? That tactile sense of being able to manipulate things and to very intuitively move through constructions is very, very powerful, and it's a time to introduce a whole new level of understanding of music. That's my deep, deep desire. Now that we've done some of this research, you'll see in a bit Jed's story, and there's a ton of great new brain research out there about, the brain is neuroplastic, as they're calling it. It's able to develop even at an advanced age sometimes. Neurogenesis, where it literally generates new brain cells in kids at as little as 4 months of music lessons. This is astonishing kind of research that we feel like we're at the beginning of. And the piano and to some degree guitar, other instruments that are parallel, have tremendous implications for the brain. And I'm very excited, and I'm hoping that you guys will join us. And I think you'll see this is a very, very fun project to be involved in, and very thrilling, and we're just at the beginning. And believe me, when I roll out these other games, you're going to be thrilled. It's going to be so simple, and yet you'll be able to build the most complex musical pieces possible, and you'll be able to take the most complex music pieces and deconstruct them. And that's part of our big dream, is to make music a birthright for all.